They came expecting sheep. What they found were wolves in sheep's clothing. For 3 centuries, the Empire had swept across 17 star systems, their adaptive combat suits making them virtually invincible. Every species they encountered fell within days, their primitive weapons useless against technology that could withstand plasma fire and kinetic bombardment. The humans of Earth would be no different, just another entry in their catalog of conquered worlds. But as Commander stood on the ridge overlooking the human settlement, something felt wrong. The humans below moved with purpose, not panic. They weren't running, they weren't hiding, they were waiting. And when the first human smiled up at him through a primitive optical scope, certainty began to crack, just like his helmet would very soon. The morning mist clung to the valley like a shroud as Commander adjusted his tactical display. 300 meters below, the human settlement of Pine Ridge spread across the landscape like a cancer that needed excision. Through his enhanced optics, he could see them moving about their daily routines, tending to their primitive crops, repairing their crude structures, completely oblivious to the death that watched them from above. "Target confirmed, Command," spoke into his helmet communicator, his mandibles clicking with satisfaction. "Settlement designation Human 77 Alpha. Population estimated at 412 individuals. No visible defensive structures. No energy signatures suggesting advanced weaponry." The response crackled through his audio implants with typical efficiency. "Acknowledged, Strike Leader. Proceed with standard pacification protocol. Expected resistance time." His 4 eyes swept across the settlement one more time. Wooden buildings, wheeled vehicles that burned fossil fuels, humans carrying what appeared to be ancient projectile weapons, the kind that fired metal slugs using chemical propulsion. It was almost insulting. 6 minutes, Command, possibly less." "Understood. Glory to the Empire." "Glory to the Empire," replied, cutting the connection. He turned to address his strike team, 50 of the finest warriors the military had produced. Each wore the standard Mark VII adaptive combat suit, a technological marvel that had made them the scourge of the known galaxy. The suits were works of art as much as instruments of war. Crafted from living metal that could reshape itself in response to incoming threats, they rendered conventional weapons useless. Projectile rounds would be absorbed and redistributed as kinetic energy. Energy weapons would be dispersed across the suit's surface and channeled into the power core. Even explosives merely provided additional energy for the suit systems. "Warriors," announced, his voice carrying the authority of countless victories, "behold our latest conquest. These humans represent the same primitive mindset we have encountered on 16 previous worlds. They cling to their outdated technologies and refuse to accept the superiority of the Empire." Subcommander Eth, his second-in-command, gestured toward the settlement with one of her 4 arms. "Strike Leader, our intelligence reports suggest these humans have only recently achieved basic. Their weapons technology appears to be several centuries behind our own. Should we not offer them the traditional opportunity to surrender?" His laugh was a harsh, grating sound that echoed through his helmet. "Look at them, Eth. They know we're here. Our scouts have been observing them for 3 days, yet they continue their daily routines as if nothing has changed. Either they are too stupid to comprehend the threat we represent, or they are too arrogant to care. In either case, they have chosen their fate." The truth was more complex than realized. The humans below were indeed aware of their presence. Every movement of the scout ships had been tracked, analyzed, and reported to a network that stretched far beyond this small settlement. But rather than flee or panic, the humans had done something that, understanding, they had prepared. Dr. Sarah stood at the window of Pine Ridge's community center, watching the aliens on the ridge through a pair of binoculars that had belonged to her grandfather. To any observer, she appeared calm, almost bored. But her heart hammered against her ribs as she counted the distinctive silhouettes of battle suits. "How many?" asked the settlement's elected leader and former military engineer. 51 total, standard strike team configuration based on the intelligence reports from the outer colonies." Sarah lowered the binoculars and turned to face the 23 other humans who had gathered in the center. "They're positioning themselves for a classic assault. Overwhelming force, minimal casualties on their side, complete subjugation of the target population." Nodded grimly. "Then they're expecting this to go exactly like it did on New Geneva, Station, and all the others." "But it won't," said Pine Ridge's head of agriculture and former Special Forces operative. Because we know something they don't. The something they knew had cost humanity 17 colonies and nearly 2 million lives to learn. The adaptive combat suits were indeed nearly invincible against conventional weapons. Energy weapons, projectile rounds, explosives, all were rendered harmless by the suit's remarkable ability to absorb and redistribute incoming energy. But the suits had a weakness, one that the empires had failed to consider when they designed them for combat against known threats. The living metal that made the suits so effective was actually a symbiotic organism, bred and trained to respond to specific types of stimuli. It could adapt to energy, kinetic force, and thermal variations, but it had never encountered certain frequencies of sound. More specifically, it had never encountered the resonance frequency of its own crystalline neural matrix. The discovery had been made by Doctor on the mining station moments before the station was overrun. She had been analyzing debris from a damaged suit when she noticed something unusual about its internal structure. The neural pathways that controlled the suit's adaptive responses were based on a crystalline lattice that vibrated at a very specific frequency. Doctor's final transmission, sent just before the station fell, contained a single piece of information that would change the course of the war. The exact resonance frequency of suit neural matrices, and the fact that sustained exposure to that frequency would cause catastrophic system failure. The message had reached Earth's military command just hours before the fleet arrived in the outer system. There had been no time for a coordinated military response, no time to evacuate the colonies. But there had been time to send a single message to every human settlement, build speakers, tune them to 847.6 Hz, hide them well, wait for the signal. Pine Ridge had received that message 3 days ago. Since then, every man, woman, and child in the settlement had worked with desperate efficiency to prepare their trap. Speakers had been concealed in barns, buried under gardens, hidden in grain silos and water towers. Power cables had been run underground, connecting everything to the settlement's geothermal plant. The entire town had become a weapon. On the ridge, completed his pre-battle inspection. His warriors stood in perfect formation, their adaptive suits gleaming in the morning sunlight. Each was a veteran of multiple campaigns, their efficiency proven on a dozen different worlds against a dozen different species. Remember, he told them, we are representatives of the Empire's might. We show no mercy to those who refuse to accept our superiority. We take no unnecessary casualties. We demonstrate the futility of resistance. The warriors acknowledged his words with synchronized movements of their helmets. They had heard these words before, on other worlds, facing other species that had dared to stand against the Empire. The outcome was always the same. Activated his suit's tactical display and began the final approach vector. Strike Team Alpha advanced to engagement range, weapons free upon contact with hostile forces. The warriors began their descent toward Pine Ridge in perfect battle formation. Their suits automatically adjusted to the terrain, providing optimal traction and stability. Threat assessment subroutines scanned continuously for energy signatures, weapon emanations, and defensive positions. They found nothing that registered as a threat. As the aliens approached, Sarah took her position at the community center's emergency broadcast console. Around the settlement, 24 other humans moved to their assigned locations with calm precision. Children had been moved to the deepest basements. Non-combatants huddled in reinforced shelters, but most of Pine Ridge's adult population remained at their posts, waiting for the moment when everything would change. Stood on the front porch of his home, a hunting rifle in his hands and a slight smile on his weathered face. To the approaching, he would look like exactly what they expected, a primitive human with an obsolete weapon, too ignorant to realize the futility of his situation. Crouched behind a hay bale near the settlement's entrance, her own rifle trained on the advancing aliens. Like she appeared to be nothing more than a desperate defender making a final stand against overwhelming odds. But appearances, as they were about to learn, could be fatally deceptive. The lead elements of the strike team reached the settlement's perimeter. Their suit sensors detected the primitive humans and their laughably inadequate weapons, but nothing that warranted caution. Standard protocol called for immediate demonstration of superiority to break enemy morale. Targeted the human on the porch, apparently the settlement's leader based on his prominent position. A single plasma burst would vaporize him completely, sending an unmistakable message to the other defenders. He raised his weapon and took aim. In the community center, Sarah's hand hovered over the activation switch. Every hidden speaker in Pine Ridge was connected to this console, waiting for the signal that would turn their quiet town into something unprecedented in galactic history. The first plasma bolt screamed through the morning air, its blue-white trail burning a path directly towards chest. True to expectations, the bolt should have killed him instantly, his primitive defenses no match for advanced energy weapons. Instead, something impossible happened. Didn't die, he didn't even flinch. The plasma bolt struck some kind of transparent barrier 3 feet in front of him and dispersed harmlessly into the air. Where the energy dissipated, the air itself seemed to shimmer and dance. His mandibles clicked in confusion. His tactical display showed no energy signatures, no force field generators, no defensive technology of any kind. Yet somehow, impossibly, the human had survived a direct hit from a weapon that could penetrate 6 inches of reinforced steel. "Strike leader," came Eth's voice through the comm. "My shot was also deflected. Unknown defensive technology detected." Similar reports crackled through the communication network as other warriors encountered the same impossible phenomenon. Their weapons, the pinnacle of military technology, were being stopped by defenses that didn't register on any of their sensors. The explanation was both simpler and more sophisticated than the aliens could imagine. The barriers that protected the humans weren't energy fields or physical shields. They were interference patterns created by precisely tuned sound waves that disrupted the plasma bolt's coherence at the quantum level. Doctor's discovery had revealed more than just the suit's weakness. It had exposed fundamental gaps in understanding of physics. But the humans weren't done revealing their surprises. Raised his hunting rifle and fired a single shot. The bullet, a simple piece of lead propelled by chemical explosives, struck chest plate and bounced harmlessly away. The suit's adaptive systems absorbed the kinetic energy exactly as designed, converting it into power for the suit's other systems. His laughter echoed through his helmet's speakers, loud enough for the humans to hear. "Is that the best you can do, primitive? Your weapons are useless against the might of the Empire." The other joined in his laughter, their amusement broadcasting on open frequencies for the humans to hear. It was a psychological warfare tactic they had used on every world they conquered, demonstrate the futility of resistance while mocking their victims' desperate attempts to fight back. But as their laughter reached its peak, Sarah smiled and pressed the activation switch. The effect was instantaneous and devastating. Every hidden speaker in Pine Ridge activated simultaneously, flooding the settlement with a sound that no human ear could detect, but that every suit recognized with fatal clarity. 847.6 Hertz, the exact resonance frequency of neural matrix crystals. The laughter stopped abruptly as 51 adaptive combat suits began to vibrate in harmony with the hidden sound. At first, the vibration was subtle, just a barely perceptible tremor that the warriors attributed to some kind of seismic activity. But the resonance frequency was relentless, and the crystalline matrices that controlled their suits began to respond exactly as Doctor had predicted. The vibrations grew stronger, more pronounced, until the suits themselves became the source of their own destruction. Watched in horror as hairline cracks began to appear across his helmet's surface. His tactical display flickered and distorted as the neural pathways that controlled his suit's systems started to fail. Around him, his warriors were experiencing the same catastrophic breakdown. "Command, this is Strike Leader," he transmitted desperately, his voice crackling with static as his communication systems degraded. "We are under attack by unknown sonic weapons. Request immediate extraction." The response was garbled and intermittent. The resonance frequency was interfering with every system in their suits, including long-range communications. And still the humans watched, their faces calm and patient as the most feared warriors in the galaxy began to fall apart before their eyes. The cracks in his helmet spread like a spider web across the transparent aluminum. His breathing apparatus started to fail, flooding his helmet with the native atmosphere of this primitive world. His targeting systems went offline. His weapons powered down. His mobility servos locked up, leaving him standing motionless in the middle of the settlement he had come to conquer. One by one, the warriors began to collapse as their suits' life support systems failed. Some tried to remove their helmets manually, but the resonance frequency had fused the sealing mechanisms. Others attempted to flee, but their mobility systems no longer responded to neural commands. Walked slowly toward the immobilized, his hunting rifle still in his hands but no longer necessary. The alien commander's suit had become his prison, its adaptive systems now working against him instead of protecting him. "You came here expecting to find primitives," said, his voice carrying clearly through the failing communication systems. "You expected us to cower and surrender just like all the others." Tried to respond, but his voice system was offline. He could only watch through the spreading cracks in his visor as the human approached. "But you made a mistake," continued. "You assumed that because our weapons look primitive, our minds must be primitive too. You forgot that intelligence isn't about having the best technology. It's about using whatever you have to solve the problem in front of you." Around the settlement, the other humans emerged from their positions to examine the fallen. Some were still alive, trapped inside their malfunctioning suits. Others had succumbed to system failures that their biology couldn't survive. Knelt beside one of the fallen warriors, studying the intricate patterns of cracks that covered his suit. "Sarah was right about the frequency," she called out. "Complete neural matrix collapse across the entire strike team." In the community center, Sarah was already composing the message that would be transmitted to every human settlement in the galaxy. The message was simple but revolutionary. They could be defeated. Their seemingly invincible technology had a fatal flaw, and humanity had found it. But even as she typed, Sarah knew that this victory was just the beginning. They would adapt as they always did. They would redesign their suits, find countermeasures for the resonance frequency, return with new tactics and technologies. The war was far from over. But for the first time since the invasion began, humanity had struck back. And from the ridge where the alien commanders had stood in arrogant certainty just minutes before, the sound of cracking helmets and failing systems echoed across the valley like a promise of things to come. 3 days after Pine Ridge, the High Command received a transmission that would reshape their understanding of the human threat. The message came not from their strike team, whose fate remained unknown, but from a human settlement called New Haven, located in the system. Fleet Admiral studied the holographic display with growing unease. New Haven had been scheduled for subjugation by Strike Team Beta, led by her most experienced field commander. Like the Pine Ridge operation, it should have been a routine pacification mission against primitive humans with obsolete weapons. Instead, the entire strike team had simply disappeared. "Show me the last transmission," she ordered, her bioluminescent crest flashing with agitation. The communication officer, a young with the eager demeanor of someone who had never seen real combat, activated the playback system. Static filled the command center, punctuated by fragments of terrified voices. "Unknown sonic attack. Suits failing. Can't move, helmet breached. How did they know?" Then silence. 4 eyes fixed on the tactical display showing the locations of 17 human settlements across 5 star systems. Each had been assigned a strike team. Each strike team had reported initial success, and each had subsequently gone silent within hours of beginning their assault. "Theories," she demanded, addressing the gathered intelligence staff. Senior Analyst K stepped forward, his movements betraying the nervous energy of someone delivering unwelcome news. "Admiral, preliminary analysis suggests coordinated resistance using previously unknown technology. The timing of the failures across multiple systems implies advanced preparation and communication between human settlements." "Impossible," snapped. "Our intelligence reports confirmed that humans lack faster-than-light communication. Their technology is centuries behind our own. They cannot coordinate operations across interstellar distances." "Nevertheless, Admiral, the evidence suggests exactly that. Every strike team reported identical phenomena before communications were lost. Defensive barriers that neutralized plasma weapons, followed by some form of sonic attack that caused catastrophic suit failures." His crest dimmed as she processed this information. In 3 centuries of expansion, the Empire had never encountered resistance that could coordinate across star systems. Most species barely manage to organize planetary defenses, let alone interstellar strategy. But the humans, apparently, were different. On Earth, in a bunker complex buried beneath the mountains of Colorado, Dr. Sarah stood before a holographic map that showed the same 17 settlements that troubled. But where the Admiral saw impossible coordination, Sarah saw the culmination of decades of careful preparation. "Confirm status of all settlements," she said to the assembled team of scientists, engineers, and military personnel who had spent the last 72 hours in this underground command center. "New Haven reports complete neutralization of Strike Team Beta," announced Colonel James Mitchell, formerly of Earth's United Defense Force. 37 enemy combatants eliminated, 6 captured alive. Their suits are being analyzed for additional vulnerabilities. "Station confirms similar results," added Dr. Lisa Park, who had spent years studying captured technology. "The resonance frequency attack was 100% effective. Every suit in the strike team suffered complete neural matrix collapse." One by one, reports came in from settlements across human space. Harmony Colony, complete victory. New Geneva, 23 casualties, 0 human losses. Base, enemy strike team eliminated, technology recovered for analysis. The pattern was consistent across every engagement. They had approached each settlement expecting routine conquest. Instead, they had walked into carefully prepared traps that turned their most advanced technology against them. "How," asked General, the highest-ranking military officer present, "how did we coordinate 17 simultaneous operations across 5-star systems without faster-than-light communication?" Sarah smiled, an expression that contained both pride and grim satisfaction. "We didn't coordinate them simultaneously, General. We coordinated them 75 years ago." The explanation began with humanity's first contact with the Empire, when long-range sensors detected the alien fleet entering the outer reaches of human space. Analysis of their technology and tactics had revealed a disturbing pattern. Every species they encountered was defeated within days of first contact, usually by a combination of technological superiority and psychological warfare. But humanity's scientists had noticed something else in the intelligence reports from the few survivors of other worlds. They were creatures of habit. They used the same tactics, the same formation patterns, the same psychological approaches on every world they conquered. Their success had made them predictable. More importantly, their adaptive suits, while remarkably effective against known threats, were built around assumptions about what those threats would be. The suits could adapt to energy weapons, projectile rounds, and explosives because those were the weapons that every spacefaring species eventually developed. But they couldn't adapt to threats their designers had never imagined. "The frequency," Doctor continued, referencing the discovery that had made their victory possible, "was identified during analysis of the incident. But Doctor's research was based on theoretical work that began decades earlier, when we first detected technology signatures. The real breakthrough had come from an unexpected source: humanity's music industry. Doctor, an acoustic engineer who designed concert sound systems, had been studying the harmonic properties of crystalline structures for a new type of speaker design. When Doctor's preliminary research on neural matrices was, Doctor immediately recognized the resonance patterns. Within months, every human settlement had received detailed plans for constructing sonic weapons disguised as everyday infrastructure. Speaker systems were hidden in buildings, buried underground, incorporated into farming equipment and water purification plants. To any observer, they looked like the primitive technology of a species that had barely achieved interstellar flight. In reality, they were components of the most sophisticated weapon humanity had ever built. But the sonic weapons were only part of the strategy. The plasma disruption fields that had protected the human defenders required an even deeper understanding of physics than the possessed. "The barrier technology," explained Dr. Park, "exploits a fundamental flaw in energy weapon design. Their plasma bolts maintain coherence through quantum entanglement of charged particles, but if you can generate the right interference pattern." She activated a holographic display showing the quantum mechanics involved. To most observers, it looked like incomprehensible mathematics. But to the scientists in the room, it represented years of theoretical work finally vindicated by practical results. The never encountered this approach because no other species understood quantum mechanics well enough to develop it, Dr. Park continued. They assumed that any species primitive enough to use projectile weapons would be too primitive to manipulate quantum fields. General shook her head in amazement. So we let them think we were primitives while we developed weapons they couldn't even imagine. More than that, said Colonel Mitchell. We used their own arrogance against them. They came to each settlement expecting an easy victory over backward humans with obsolete weapons. They never considered that our primitive appearance might be deliberate misdirection. The strategy had worked beyond their most optimistic projections. 17 strike teams eliminated, nearly 800 warriors dead or captured, advanced technology recovered for analysis, and most importantly, the myth of invincibility shattered across the galaxy. But even as they celebrated their unprecedented victory, Sarah and her team knew that the real war was just beginning. In her flagship above the human colony of Prime, Admiral stared at the tactical display with growing comprehension. The humans hadn't simply defended themselves. They had demonstrated capabilities that challenged everything the Empire believed about technological development. Recall all remaining strike teams, she ordered. Full fleet mobilization. We are no longer dealing with a primitive species. Admiral, interrupted Communications Officer L, we're receiving a transmission from the human settlements. It appears to be directed at the fleet. On screen, the holographic display shimmered and resolved into the image of a human female standing in what appeared to be a military command center. Behind her, could see other humans working at sophisticated computer systems that looked nothing like the primitive technology their intelligence reports had described. I am Dr. Sarah speaking on behalf of the Human Defense Coalition, the woman said, her voice carrying clearly through the translation matrix. Your strike teams came to our worlds expecting to find easy prey. Instead, you found something you've never encountered before, an enemy that learned from your past victories. Felt her bioluminescent crest flare with anger. No conquered species had ever dared to address the Empire with such confidence. Your adaptive suits are impressive technology, Doctor continued, but they were designed to counter known threats. We represent an unknown threat. Your plasma weapons are powerful, but they rely on quantum coherence that can be disrupted. Your psychological warfare is effective against species that fear your technology, but it fails against enemies who understand that technology better than you do. The transmission paused as Doctor seemed to consult something off-screen. When she returned her attention to the camera, her expression had hardened. You have a choice, Admiral. You can withdraw from human space now, with your remaining forces intact. Or you can continue this war and learn that humanity has prepared surprises for your main fleet that will make the destruction of your strike teams look like a minor skirmish. Admiral's mandibles clicked with fury. Cut the transmission. Prepare for full assault on all human settlements simultaneously. If they want to play at being warriors, we will show them what real war looks like. But as her staff rushed to carry out her orders, found herself troubled by a disturbing thought. If the humans had hidden their true capabilities so completely, what other surprises might they have prepared? 3 light-years away, in the asteroid field that surrounded the system's outermost planet, something vast and dark shifted in the shadows between the rocks. To any casual observer, it would have looked like just another asteroid, an unremarkable chunk of stone and ice drifting through the void. But hidden within its carefully disguised hull were weapon systems that represented the pinnacle of human engineering, powered by technologies that the Empire had never even theorized. The object was one of dozens scattered throughout human space, each positioned along predicted fleet routes, each carrying enough firepower to challenge a small fleet. They were humanity's trump card, the final surprise in a war strategy that had begun the moment alien signals were first detected in human space. While they had spent centuries perfecting weapons to fight known enemies, humanity had spent decades developing weapons specifically designed to fight. The message Doctor had transmitted to Admiral was not a bluff. It was a warning, the last one the Empire would receive before learning that their greatest strength, their predictability, had become their greatest weakness. On Earth, in the Colorado bunker, Sarah watched the tactical display as fleet elements began moving toward human settlements. The Admiral had chosen to escalate rather than withdraw, exactly as the psychological profiles had predicted. Activate the Prometheus array, she ordered quietly. Across human space, dormant systems came online. Weapons that had waited decades for this moment began their final preparations. And in the asteroid field of the system, something that looked like a rock began to move with deadly purpose toward the approaching fleet. The real war was about to begin, and Admiral was about to learn that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't technology at all. It was the ability to think like their enemies while remaining utterly unpredictable themselves. The ridge where the alien commanders had once laughed in confidence was now marked by the wreckage of their hopes and the birth of something entirely new. A war between species where the primitives had become the hunters and the advanced civilization had become the prey. Admiral stood in the command center of her flagship, the Eternal Conquest, watching the holographic display with growing unease. Her remaining fleet, 437 vessels representing the might of the Empire, moved in perfect formation toward the human settlements of the system. It should have been a moment of triumph. The largest military force ever assembled by the Empire, armed with weapons that had subjugated 17 different species across 3 centuries of expansion. Against a primitive species that had somehow managed a few lucky victories through trickery and desperation. But something felt wrong. The humans were broadcasting on open frequencies, transmitting what appeared to be routine communications between their settlements. Agricultural reports, weather updates, shipping schedules, the mundane chatter of a civilization going about its normal business, completely ignoring the approaching fleet that would determine their fate. "Admiral," reported Navigation Officer, "we're detecting unusual asteroid activity in the outer system. Some of the larger objects appear to be moving in non-standard orbital patterns." Attention shifted to the sensor displays. The system's asteroid field was dense and chaotic, making detailed scanning difficult. But there did seem to be anomalous movement among some of the larger rocks. "Probably gravitational perturbations from our fleet's approach," she decided. "Continue on course. All vessels maintain battle formation. The humans may have more surprises, but they cannot hide an entire civilization." She was wrong on both counts. Hidden among the asteroids, Captain monitored the approaching fleet from the bridge of the UES Prometheus, humanity's first and most advanced stealth battleship. To sensors, her vessel appeared to be nothing more than a large asteroid, its true nature concealed by metamaterial coating and careful heat management. "Fleet count confirmed at 437 vessels," she reported to her crew. "Flagship identified as Eternal-class Dreadnought, Admiral commanding. Standard battle formation approaching human settlements on Vector 77 Mark IV." Commander Sarah transferred from her research role to serve as the Prometheus's strategic operations officer, studied the tactical display with satisfaction. The fleet was approaching exactly as predicted, following standard Empire doctrine for planetary assault operations. "Distance to optimum intercept point?" asked. 47 minutes at current approach velocity," replied Lieutenant Commander James Park, the ship's tactical officer and Dr. Lisa Park's younger brother. "All Prometheus array vessels report ready for simultaneous engagement." Nodded, the Prometheus array, humanity's most carefully guarded secret, consisted of 12 stealth battleships hidden throughout human space. Each ship was the product of 70 years of technological development, built specifically to fight using weapons and tactics the Empire had never encountered. Unlike the defensive victories at Pine Ridge and other settlements, this would be humanity's first offensive operation. The moment when they stopped reacting to aggression and started dictating the terms of engagement. "Signal from Earth Command," announced Communications Officer. "Operation Revelation is authorized. All vessels are weapons-free." Felt a grim smile cross her face. "Acknowledged, Earth Command. Prometheus Array, this is Prometheus Actual. Execute Revelation on my mark." Across the system, 11 other stealth battleships received the signal and began their final approach vectors. Like the Prometheus, each ship had waited decades for this moment, their crews trained from childhood for a war that had seemed inevitable since humanity's first contact with alien technology. But the Prometheus array was more than just a collection of advanced warships. It represented a fundamental shift in how humanity thought about warfare. Rather than trying to build bigger guns or stronger armor, human engineers had focused on understanding their enemy's psychology and exploiting their predictable behavior patterns. They expected their enemies to fight defensively, using superior positions and static fortifications to offset technological disadvantages. Every species they had conquered had followed this pattern, making them easy to defeat with standard siege tactics. They did not expect their enemies to have studied their tactics for decades, reverse-engineered their technology, and developed countermeasures specifically designed to turn strengths into fatal weaknesses. Admiral called sensor technician from his station aboard the Eternal Conquest. I'm detecting energy signatures from multiple asteroids. The patterns don't match any known natural phenomena. Admiral's bioluminescent crest flashed with alarm. Enhanced sensors, full spectrum analysis of the asteroid field. The results were immediately disturbing. 17 of the largest asteroids in the field showed signs of artificial energy generation, sophisticated heat management systems, and what appeared to be weapon signatures unlike anything in the database. Impossible, muttered. Stealth technology of this sophistication requires industrial capabilities far beyond what these primitives possess. She was making the same mistake that had cost her strike teams, assuming that human technology had developed naturally, following the same progression as other species. She didn't understand that humanity's technological development had been guided by decades of studying artifacts and intelligence reports. While other species had developed incrementally, building on their existing knowledge base, humanity had engaged in targeted research specifically designed to counter known capabilities. The result was a technological profile unlike anything the Empire had encountered, primitive in some areas, incredibly advanced in others. Fleet-wide alert, commanded. Unknown hostile vessels detected in asteroid field. All ships, combat formation Delta 7, prepare for engagement. The fleet began to restructure itself, their ships moving with practiced efficiency into a defensive formation that had proven effective against conventional attackers. Energy shields activated. Weapon systems powered up. Point defense networks came online. It was exactly what Captain had been hoping for. They're repositioning into defensive formation, reported Commander. Formation pattern matches standard doctrine for dealing with multiple attackers from concealed positions. Which means they're clustering their ships for mutual defense, observed with satisfaction. Just like they did at the Battle of the Siege of New Geneva and every other engagement in their military history. The predictability had been their greatest strength against conventional enemies, allowing them to deploy proven tactics with reliable results. But against an enemy that had studied those tactics in detail, predictability became a fatal vulnerability. All Prometheus vessels, execute attack pattern Alpha, commanded. Target their flagship on my mark. The response was immediate and devastating. 12 stealth battleships dropped their disguises simultaneously, revealing sleek vessels that looked nothing like human technology they had previously encountered. These ships were built using principles derived from captured technology, but optimized for different purposes. Where ships emphasized heavy armor and overwhelming firepower, the Prometheus vessels prioritized speed, stealth, and precision strikes. Their weapons were designed not to overpower defenses, but to exploit specific vulnerabilities in shield technology that human scientists had discovered through years of analysis. The first volley caught Admiral's fleet completely off guard. Instead of the massed energy bombardment they expected from human weapons, the attack came in the form of quantum torpedoes that phased through their shields as if they didn't exist, then detonated inside the ship's hulls. The effect was catastrophic. 3 cruisers exploded instantly, their reactor cores destabilizing under the quantum assault. 2 more lost main power and began tumbling helplessly through space. The Eternal Conquest's shields flickered and failed as exotic particles disrupted the energy matrices that maintained them. Impossible, screamed. Human technology cannot penetrate our shields. But it wasn't human technology, not originally. The quantum torpedoes were based on theoretical designs found in captured research files, weapons that the Empire's own scientists had deemed too dangerous to deploy. Humanity had taken those abandoned designs, refined them, and turned them into the most effective anti-weapons ever created. Return fire, commanded. All ships concentrate fire on the lead enemy vessel. The response was immediate and massive. Hundreds of plasma cannons opened fire simultaneously, creating a web of destruction that should have vaporized any enemy vessel caught in its path. But the Prometheus had already moved. Its quantum drive system, another technology derived from captured alien artifacts, allowed it to shift position faster than targeting systems could track. The massive plasma barrage struck empty space while the human battleship materialized behind the formation. "Second volley all vessels," commanded. "Target their command ships." This time, the human attack focused on disrupting command and control capabilities. Rather than trying to destroy every enemy vessel, they targeted the ships that coordinated fleet movements and tactical responses. It was a strategy that exploited another fundamental characteristic of military culture: their rigid adherence to centralized command structures. 6 more quantum torpedoes phased through shields and detonated inside command vessels. Communication networks failed. Navigation systems went offline. Fire control computers crashed under quantum interference effects. Within minutes, the most powerful military force in galactic history had been reduced to a collection of individual ships with no ability to coordinate their actions. But Captain wasn't finished demonstrating humanity's tactical innovations. "Deploy the protocol," she ordered. Commander's fingers moved across her console, activating systems that had never been tested in actual combat. "Protocol active. All vessels report ready for Phase 2. What happened next would have seemed impossible to any observer who understood conventional physics. The 12 human battleships began to flicker and multiply, each vessel suddenly appearing to be 3, then 5, then a dozen identical ships occupying different positions throughout the battle space. The effect wasn't illusion or holography. It was quantum superposition on a macro scale, another abandoned technology that humanity had perfected. Each Prometheus vessel existed in multiple probable locations simultaneously until the moment it fired, when quantum decoherence collapsed its position into a single point in space. They found themselves facing an enemy that was literally everywhere and nowhere at once, attacking from positions that shouldn't exist according to any known laws of physics. Admiral watched her fleet disintegrate with growing horror. Her vessels were firing randomly into empty space, chasing targets that vanished the moment they were targeted. Her casualties were mounting rapidly, while the humans seemed to take no losses at all. "How is this possible?" she demanded of her science officer. "No species should be able to develop this level of technology." "Admiral," replied Senior Scientist L, his voice tight with fear, "the quantum signatures suggest these weapons are based on theoretical research from our own archives. But the applications are far beyond anything our scientists ever achieved." The truth was worse than L realized. Humanity hadn't just stolen technology, they had perfected it. Every abandoned research project, every theoretical paper, every experimental design that the Empire had deemed too dangerous or impractical had been recovered, analyzed, and turned into operational weapons. The humans had essentially used their own scientific knowledge against them, taking ideas that no Empire scientist had been bold enough to pursue and turning them into reality. "We have to retreat," admitted, the words bitter in her mouth. "Signal the fleet, emergency withdrawal to—" Her words were cut off as quantum torpedoes materialized inside the Eternal Conquest's command center. The bridge exploded in a cascade of sparks and flames as life support systems failed and artificial gravity shut down. Through the chaos, could hear her communications officer attempting to reach the other ships in her fleet. But the responses were fragmentary and desperate. Status reports from vessels that were dying, casualty estimates that belief, tactical assessments that made no sense. In less than an hour, the largest military force in galactic history had been effectively destroyed by 12 ships crewed by members of a species the Empire had dismissed as primitive. "Admiral," gasped navigation officer, blood flowing from wounds caused by exploding console components. "Emergency beacon from the terrifying Vengeance. They report complete engine failure and request immediate assistance." Looked at her tactical display and saw the devastating truth. Of her 437 vessels, fewer than 50 remained operational. The rest were either destroyed, crippled, or adrift in space with their crews dead or dying. The humans hadn't just defeated the fleet. They had systematically dismantled it using weapons and tactics that the Empire's finest military minds had never imagined. "Broadcast on all frequencies," ordered, her pride crumbling in the face of absolute defeat. "This is Admiral of the Empire. I formally surrender my remaining forces and request terms for the cessation of hostilities." The response came not from the human battleships, but from the surface of Prime, where Dr. Sarah had returned to coordinate the post-battle operations. "Admiral, this is Dr. Sarah of the Human Defense Coalition. Your surrender is accepted. However, the terms for cessation of hostilities are non-negotiable. The Empire will withdraw all forces from human space immediately. Any attempt to return will be met with the full force of technologies you cannot comprehend." Its bioluminescent crest dimmed to almost nothing as she realized the implications. The Empire that had conquered 17 species across 3 centuries of expansion had been stopped cold by a species they had underestimated completely. "Furthermore," Doctor continued, "the Empire will provide reparations to all species previously conquered and will submit to monitoring by an interstellar council to prevent future acts of aggression. These terms are final and non-negotiable." As the communication ended, found herself staring at a tactical display that told the story of her empire's downfall in stark detail. The humans had used their own arrogance and predictability against them, turning 3 centuries of military success into a fatal vulnerability. From the ridge where Commander had once laughed at human primitiveness, the wreckage of alien technology stretched across the landscape like a monument to the dangers of underestimating one's enemies. The helmets that had cracked and fallen now served as reminders that in war, intelligence and adaptability were more valuable than raw technological superiority. Humanity had won not because they were more advanced, but because they were more clever. They had studied their enemies, understood their weaknesses, and prepared countermeasures that turned the greatest strengths into fatal flaws. The galaxy would never be the same. The age of domination was over, ended by a species that had learned the most important lesson of all. In the vast cosmos, survival belonged not to the strongest or most advanced, but to those who could think, adapt, and turn their enemies' arrogance into their downfall. The war was over, but the universe had gained something far more valuable than peace. It had gained proof that intelligence and determination could triumph over technological superiority and military might. From the ridge to the stars, the lesson echoed clear. Never underestimate the species that builds its weapons with both steel and wit.